Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. I call this meeting to order. We have 6 members present and our student board member, so we do have a quorum. At this time, I will call on Member Darrell Evans to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to recognize some dignitaries we have with us in the audience this evening. We have members of the Boonesboro Town Council, Mr. Anthony Nally, Mrs. Marilee Kearns, Ms. Terry Hollingshead, and Mr. Ray Hansen. Welcome. We'll move to the approval of this evening's agenda. Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zegmeyer. Any discussion of the agenda? Any questions? All those in favor of approval? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes, and the student member concurs, so we have approval of the agenda. We'll move to approval of the minutes.
Mrs. Williams, I move for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, September 21st, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Westford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the closed session of September 21st, 2021? All those in favor of approval? Okay, thank you. We have 6 affirmative votes. Those minutes are approved.
I'd also make a motion for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, September 21st, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Westford. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the business meeting of September 21st, 2021? Okay. All those in favor of approval? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Those minutes are approved. This time we'll have public comment. I have 2 individuals who have signed up this evening. Would Deborah Williams Cruz please come forward? Good evening, Mrs. Cruz. You have 5 minutes to address the board.
Okay.
Mr. Bickford, is there a timer? Do you want to explain what the...
About 30 seconds left, and then this means to close out your comments.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, members of the school board and other attendees. My name is Deborah Williams Cruz. I am a concerned citizen of Washington County who cares very much about children's education, and especially the education of Washington County children, which directly affects their future in our community. I have had 3 children who attended the Washington County public school system, 2 daughters who graduated from Boonesboro High, and both participate in the magnet programs at Boonesboro High and the middle college program at Hagerstown Community College. I also have a son that I homeschooled who is currently a sophomore at the University of Baltimore County, and an Air Force cadet at the University of Maryland, College Park. My reason for wanting to address you today is I am concerned about the lack of transparency regarding the resources that are used in the social studies departments in elementary, middle, and high school levels. The lack of transparency makes it impossible for parents to determine what is being presented in classrooms. In February of 2021, I contacted the social studies content curriculum specialists for each of the grade levels and found that they adhere to the Maryland State Social Studies standards, and that they try to encourage an inquiry-based approach for all grade levels. After reviewing their emails, I found the scope very broad. Also, the list of materials wanting because it didn't help me know much more about the resources. This situation is unlike that of many Maryland counties, such as Montgomery, Frederick, Carroll, and Prince George, which all provide some review periods, such as 30 days for parents or the community to come in and view and make comments. For a person trying to grasp the actual content that is being presented to the students, it isn't very helpful in that some of the material is online, but many of the sources are online and not accessible. Although there is no opportunity to review books that are in use when that is the case. I am requesting that Washington County also present parents and the community the opportunity to be more engaged and aware of the content of what is being taught in our classrooms. Knowing what our children are being taught is extremely important, and I believe that the school system has a responsibility to help parents get involved in the process. If other counties in Maryland can make the material available to parents in the community to review, why is Washington County Public Schools not doing this? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Marilee Kearns?
Good evening. I know many of you. I'm Marilee Kearns. I'm on the council down in Boonesboro, and I brought with me a couple council people. They were introduced earlier, Terry Hollingshead, Ray Hansen, and Tony Nally. I want to thank all of you for serving on the board. I know it can be a thankless job with many hours of preparation and a devotion of time, and we are here as representatives of the citizens of Boonesboro. The Board of Education Transportation Department changed the routing of school buses during the 2019-2020 school year. The buses now exit the school down a narrow town street, Center Street, which truthfully was an alley during a good portion of my life. The street's a narrow street. It does not have sidewalks on the complete path. Many of the town residents still refer to it as an alley. The students who live in town use this as a walking route home. The decision to route buses down this street, up another town street, Lakin Avenue, and then line them up and wait for the traffic light on St. Paul Street has caused multiple problems for our small community. The students walking think it's a game to dodge in and out and in front and between buses. Our side streets were not designed to hold this volume of bus traffic. It creates a hazard for emergency services to exit our fire station and respond to town emergencies. And it has created stress on our infrastructure as these streets were not designed to haul these buses coming up them every day. Students live on these streets are not even offered bus service to and from school. So the streets being used for buses are not on the primary snow removal list. Due to COVID and school shutdowns, this was not an issue last winter because we didn't attend school. So this problem hasn't even been encountered and addressed yet. I do not know the reason for the change to exit the buses traffic onto the small town side streets and why the exit of buses onto the main artery for Campus Drive onto Maple Avenue is changed. We are here to state that the change is not beneficial to our community, and discussion to have this change has been long and it's been stalled. Our town manager has spent numerous hours handling resident complaints and contacting the transportation department and attempting to facilitate a solution. We're here to state that action is required. We're not waiting for a spring 2022 traffic study, and we're not going to get this problem resolved. We're all on the same team to support our community, and that means the Board of Education changing routes to make an unsafe situation in our community needs immediate attention and resolution. A school crossing guard can be hired, police can be hired, fire service police on site at the end of the school day to let the buses out onto Maple Avenue is a solution that can be implemented quickly. A long-term fix could be to install a flashing light that operates on limited hours at school release is acceptable. But the continuation of the buses exiting onto Center Street is not acceptable. And an additional issue that needs addressed now is the long line of parents waiting to pick up, students in vehicles that now extends onto the street, out into the street, interrupting the flow of traffic, and even sits through an intersection where a light is that changes multiple times while they're sitting there. The red tape needs to be moved aside, immediate attention, and a resolution needs to happen that's agreeable to the community and not just the Board of Ed Transportation Department. Sincerely, the Warrior community and the town council. And I have copies for you guys, but I literally emailed all of you when this first started a year and a half, 2 years ago. I know the town manager and mayor have worked with something, but this just should not take this long to fix. I mean, my whole life, and I've raised my kids through high school, all the school grades there. I went all the grades there. The buses come out on the main artery, the road that's designed for bus traffic and for 2 buses to pass. And you can't get cars past them. They're going down an alley that another car can't come up and down. It is a mess. We're upset. So now we're going to start to be the squeaky wheel so that we get this addressed. And if you want to ask me a question or something about it, but we don't want to be hardball, but we're going to play hardball if we can't get this fixed. All right?
Thank you, Ms. Kearns.
Thanks.
Those are the only 2 speakers that I have on the list who have signed up in advance. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward? Yes, sir? Your name, please?
Ethan Lowen. And I'm speaking about a series of comments made at the last board meeting. As I've been paying attention to the last several meetings, I've noticed a series of actions that was best illustrated by those comments. The board members' discussion was about the Board of Education members being officers of the state, the implication being that the board members could face consequences if they vote or speak against the policies of the governor or his bureaucratic appointees. So the day after that board meeting, I actually spoke to a constitutional attorney here in Maryland, and there are a couple people in this room who were there with me. And I asked the attorney if that was true. His response was elected officials are indeed officers of the state. However, being an officer of the state does not take away an elected representative's freedom to speak and vote against the governor or their policies. The reason this is important is because when you, this county's representatives, publicly debate and vote, that is our constitutionally created system of citizen self-government in action. Whereas when representatives believe their political office exists to uphold the policies of a bureaucracy, that is called socialism. That's not the strangest thing for a board member to question, unfortunately. The national politicians whom the media talks about the most call themselves socialists. Therefore, asking how much ground the American system of self-government has lost to socialist bureaucratic rule is reasonable. Thankfully, the answer is none. But only as long as we continue to perform our duties under the Constitution. As a wise American once said, freedom is never more than one generation away from being lost. And once freedoms are lost, no nation has regained them. The American way of life cannot exist without self-governance. Self-governance is based on the idea that we, the people, are most qualified to create the policies that we live under. Socialism is the belief that the heads of the bureaucracy are most qualified to determine how the people live. That is why the person running for his 2nd term as governor of the state, just 27 miles to the south of where we're sitting, said during a debate with his opponent last Tuesday that parents should have no right to determine what their children learn in school. And yes, he is a member of the same political party as the congressmen and women who call themselves socialists. And that is why America has fought wars to defeat socialism. What is more oppressive than a political system that holds as one of its core tenets that parents must hand over their rights to raise their children to the government? After nearly 110 years, socialism has become as predictable as the setting sun. They always prioritize control of the education system. They do that because whoever controls a child's education holds a piece of that child's soul. And only a parent can be trusted with something that valuable. We are in a fight for our American soul, and this is what I find disturbing about this school board. The most important way for us to preserve the American dream for future generations is for us to always be practicing citizen-led self-government. Socialism cannot exist where elected representatives create and vote on the policies that the bureaucracy runs on. But other than 3 members of this board who I have heard speak their minds, What I have seen from the majority of this board is a refusal to practice self-government, a refusal to speak their values and beliefs and record those values and beliefs with a vote. A couple of months ago, the supervisor of our public schools made a decision to create masking and quarantining policies that this board neither debated nor voted upon. As a result, last month, the parents of this community showed up in numbers in this room that has not been seen in years, perhaps ever. And these parents said unequivocally that the superintendent's bureaucratic decision led to the substandard education of this county's children. Taking it upon himself to make that decision was wrong. However, after witnessing this board's refusal to practice self-government, I can empathize with how he felt forced to do that. Furthermore, to the superintendent's credit, at the last meeting, he point blank asked the board to clarify whether you want school employees to force mask wearing at social events, and he received no answer. Therefore, as a citizen, let me answer the question. The answer is no. It is not the role of school employees to force masking at social events. Parents are responsible for their children, and they have the right to decide what situations their children will or will not participate in. Therefore, the school system's responsibility is just simply to communicate that. I believe that I speak for essentially all parents when I ask that the superintendent continues to bring policy questions before the board and takes no actions until the board has created policy with their votes. Every member of this board has a responsibility to continue the American way of life by performing the duties of self-governance that governors just a few miles from us want to take away from their school boards and their citizens and their parents, and that requires that every member of this board publicly speaks their mind and votes their conscience in view of everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Your name, please?
My name is Chris Dutcher. That's tough to follow. First, I wanted to thank you guys for whoever made it possible to have the sign language interpreters here. That's amazing, and it's great to be allowing our deaf and hard of hearing parents access to this information, so thank you for that. And I also want to give a shout out to some of the staff at my daughter's school. My perfectly healthy daughter was recently quarantined, and while it was traumatic for her to think back to virtual school year, everyone did an amazing job to accommodate her. Her interpreters worked with her to help her understand the content. And we got her a second screen so she could see the interpreters and see the information she was supposed to be learning. It was not ideal, but I do want to give credit where credit's due. The Springfield Middle School teachers just did a great job, so I want to say that. I wish Mr. Stauffer was here today because some of the comments he said at the last board meeting were not only confusing, but I don't understand what he was talking about. He indicated that he's surprised that some of us who he feels may have voted for a certain presidential candidate may be hesitant to make certain medical decisions. I just want to be super clear that as a conservative, I'm an independent thinker. I don't do what any political candidate or any officer tells me to do. I do what I think is right for myself and for my family. And for him to even say that it's quite disturbing to think we would all fall in line with whatever letters are after our name. And I know some of you, I know this is a nonpartisan position, but I know the letters after your name. And many of you are certainly not falling in line with the party that you claim to belong to. So I welcome you to speak your minds. Please speak your minds, because many of us are wondering why you're thinking. Why are you making the choices you're making? Or why are you saying nothing at all? So please speak your minds, because that's why we elected you, because we wanted you to speak your mind. And some of you took money from those political organizations and those parties to put you in office, or you sought endorsement from them. So those people are the ones who put you where you are in some cases. So please speak your mind and be independent thinkers as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Detro. Anyone else? Thank you. This time we'll have board member response to public comment.
I have a question for Dr. Michael. Maybe about a couple years ago, we had a robot that we were supposed to send home to students that had issues. We still have that?
Robot actually would attend class and would be here, would be at a school, and it would send that,
So we don't-
camera kind of on wheels that send information home to students.
Do we still use that?
We still have it. But now with our huddle cams and things like that, it's just a little bit different setup that I think we pretty much have transitioned to the huddle cams. I'd have to check. We got that through a grant for home instruction students primarily. And again, we've had such virtual instruction for all students. That's been the nature of what's been going on more recently.
Okay. I was just thinking about that, of Ms. Detro's comment about her daughter was at home and needing an interpreter. I didn't know if there was some way that we could do that for other students too. I just hadn't even given that a thought for a while. Thanks.
Anyone else have comment?
Yeah, I would like to respond to all of those comments, but there's quite a bit of time that would take. I will say that as far as the openness to the curriculum content, things are very different now than when I was in school. I certainly know that. So I would like to, and this is, again, just more what I'm thinking, I would hope that we as a school system are not trying to hide it. As far as everything I can see, we're not trying to hide anything. And this is my ask, that we do come up with a way to make sure that if a parent would like to see what is in their kids' books, that we make that readily available to them. I know it's a lot easier said than done, because when we purchase these textbooks, that costs money, and if we don't have them, if we're purchasing them digitally or whatever it may be, then there's licensing, legal issues there, I would imagine. So, but again, like she said, other school systems are making it happen, so I would hope that we can make that happen too, because I do agree. I think it's only fair that parents know what is being taught in their kids' classrooms, so.
Well, and I would agree. Our curriculum's all available, and we'd be glad to explain it to any parents. Dr. Willow's in the back of the room. As parents leave, they might want to talk to him. We'd be glad to have a, meeting if it's necessary for any grade level or content, and share our curriculum. A lot of our information's online. Obviously, some of the information's online for teachers as teacher resources. But there's also student resources, a lot of material there. We do run into licensing. We can't have everyone have access to the textbook in a sense of thousands of copies of the textbook when we only purchase X number. But we can make the textbooks, our online textbooks, available, hard copies, material, again, have somebody walk through the curriculum, anything that anybody would like that can be arranged through Dr. Willow. Dr. Willow is the gentleman in the back, and certainly can address them, and he can coordinate something.
Yes, Mr. Bickford.
I just wanted to address, was Ms. Cruz at the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah, just thank you for your comments, and it just stuck out to me when you talked about how well you raised your kids, and that one of them's at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and as an Army, or as an Air Force cadet, correct? So I wanted to thank him for his service. And thank you for showing up today. And also thank you to the Boonesboro Town Council for being a squeaky wheel. I think this is, I'm not going to speak for transportation, but I know that I'm sure they will engage in dialogue, and I know this is a challenge. But we know how busy you work, and just like we're busy here, so thank you for all coming. And it was really nice to hear, Ms. Detro, that your child, the staff at your school, that you feel very good about that. So I appreciate the comments there. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just to follow up on the Boonesboro. I think there's a walking radius for students from a school. Is that for all schools?
Yes. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I think it's a half mile for pre-K, up to a mile for elementary, and up to a mile and a half for secondary students. I would say, we have a lot more parents dropping their children off right now. I think because of COVID, we have traffic issues at every school. When the Boonesboro campus was designed with only, and it had a different traffic pattern. You could go up and down the Scott Run, or whatever that's called there. You could go both directions on that when I was in school there years ago. So, we really have a campus that would only have one exit right now. So I know that Mr. Prue, who's also in the back, was working with the town council and then, or the town manager, and COVID hit, and things have been kind of a little different ever since. But we have a very, very large number of cars and buses that we have to work together. And we do want the children to be safe, including the children on the bus. And we have to watch coming out on 66 and how much traffic. But backup of traffic, unfortunately, is at almost every school at this point. Even our newer schools, we put in large car loops to try to accommodate car traffic. And at this point right now with COVID, we're not even meeting that need. We have huge numbers of parents driving their children, which I think is a good COVID prevention strategy, but it is causing traffic issues for everything. I'm sure Mr. Prue will be in touch with the town council.
Yes, Mrs. Murray.
I'd also like to thank everyone for coming tonight. We always like to hear your opinions. Boonesboro, I know exactly what you're talking about because I've been to Boonesboro and that little tiny alley, street, it's horrible. And I'm hoping that we can resolve that issue. I don't know how to respond to about our opinions. I just know that when I'm here, I have to make a decision for what's best for the whole county, not just a certain segment, but everyone. And that's a big responsibility, but I take it on because I care about Washington County Public Schools, I care about the people in the county, and I'm just up here doing the best that I can with the information that I have. So if you want to discuss things with me, I'd be glad to have a conversation with you. Call me, email me, whatever, anybody. I'd be more than willing to speak with you and share opinions. So thank you very much for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Dr. Detmar.
Thank you again for some of my former neighbors who are here from Boonesboro, and having taught there for 15 years, I know when you have a complex of 3 schools, it's always a challenge to get students out safely. I know that the principal at Boonesboro High School, Dr. Kahanick, is very, very reasonable, and I'm sure he's searching for something that will be equitable for everyone too. As far as curriculum and instruction, I chair that committee along with Mrs. Murray and Mr. Stauffer. I can't speak for all the textbooks behind me, except the ones that I taught when I taught at Boonesboro. But the new ones, we read every single textbook. Dr. Willow and his team do a fabulous job. In fact, the Maryland 4th and 5th grade curriculum, the book, one of the chapters in the book seemed a little biased. They approached the textbook company and the chapter was rewritten. A lot of the work that we do isn't sitting here, it's what we do in committee. And I want to echo what Mrs. Murray said. If you have a question, ask us. You elected us, we're responsible to you. Let us know.
Thank you to all speakers, to the members of the Boonesboro Town Council. Mr. Prue will be in contact with you, and I'm sure, or not with you, but with the town manager. And I'm sure that we can work something out to better the situation there. With regard to curriculum and textbooks, the board does have a policy. There is a policy for reviewing materials that are used in classrooms. I can't quote you that policy word for word, but it is available on the WCPS website that talks about the process for adopting materials that are instructional materials that are used in our classrooms. And then with regard to comments, regarding what I would call the politicizing of board work. Mrs. Murray has said that she's here to serve the students of the county, and I too am here to serve all students of Washington County. And to my knowledge, students don't have political parties to which they are affiliated. I am a registered voter. I do have a word beside my name, but that is not what drives my decisions. My decisions are driven by what I believe to be in the best interest of all students in Washington County, not what a political party tells me I need to do. So this is a nonpartisan position. And I think that about says it all for me. So I thank all of you who've come out tonight to offer your comments. We appreciate that very much. We have several items of old business to conduct this evening. Our first item under consideration is the second reading of proposed changes to policy JHCF, epinephrine availability and use requirements. And we have Deputy Legal Counsel Patricia Ersprung. Good evening, Mrs. Ersprung.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Michael, and members of the board. Today we have two policies before you that are here for second read. The first, as Mrs. Williams just said, is policy JHCF, entitled Epinephrine Availability and Use Requirements. During the Board of Education's public business meeting on September 21st, the board approved the first reading of proposed changes to this policy. The community was provided with an opportunity to provide comments on the proposed changes, and we have not received any comments. At this time, the Policy Committee is requesting the approval of the second reading of policy JHCF. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ersprung. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy JHCF entitled Epinephrine Availability and Use Requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Questions or discussion?
Thanks. One, I would agree, we did not receive any direct comments about it. We did receive one email, and it was mainly from a concerned citizen wondering if we approved it at the last meeting, and we did not, but this would be approval of the policy. And the policy itself mainly, and I'm chair of the policy committee, so that's why I'm speaking, brings us into line with current Maryland code. So much of the language that we added to this policy comes directly from the Maryland requirements, correct? Thank you.
Anything else? Then we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the second reading of policy JHCF, epinephrine availability and use requirements. All those in favor of approval, raise your hand. So we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Motion carries. Our next item under consideration is the second reading of proposed changes to policy JFA, students, enrollment, and attendance.
Thank you. During the Board of Education's public business meeting on September 21st, the board also approved the first reading of proposed changes to policy JFA, entitled Students, Enrollment, and Attendance. The community was provided with an opportunity to provide comments on the proposed changes, and we have not received any comments. At this time, the Policy Committee is requesting the approval of the second reading of policy JFA. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy JFA entitled Students, Enrollment, and Attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Any questions? Any discussion? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approving the second reading of proposed changes to policy JFA entitled Students, Enrollment, and Attendance, please raise your hand. Thank you. We have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Ersprung.
Thank you.
Madam President, can I make a quick comment about policy?
Absolutely.
Just so people know in the community and also my fellow board members, there was a policy that came up for first reading about early dismissal. We did receive several comments about it via email after a story in the newspaper, and so we are going to examine that policy again at the next policy meeting, and so that'll be coming forward at a later date.
I'm sorry, which one was that one?
Early dismissal and giving permission when people are at away games and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. We'll move now to new business. Our first item of new business is this evening's consent agenda. We have Mr. Scott Bechtel, Supervisor of Purchasing, presented.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. Tonight I have 4 items for your review. These items were reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and are being recommended for approval, and staff is available if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the awards and procurements for Microsoft Premier Support Services renewal to Microsoft Corporation at a cost of $115,739. Intervention phonics kits and decodable text to Benchmark Education Company at a cost of $408,192.50. Professional design services emergency generator designs for multiple schools to Geip Associates, Inc. at a cost of $115,100, and information technology infrastructure support services to Innovative, Inc. at a cost of $8,300 per month and a rate of $175 per hour for additional pre-approved work not to exceed 1 year.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Questions for Mr. Bechtel or any discussion?
Yeah, the only one I had, the phonics kits, obviously it's quite a bit of money. I understand it's grant money. I just want to make sure we're not necessarily duplicating anything. Do we have any other programs in place that do something similar? And if so, is what makes this one better?
It's an excellent question. It's really an expansion of what we're already doing. We presented these titles books at our CNI meeting. The TSI grant is specifically for struggling readers. And so really what we're doing here is giving our classroom teachers additional resources to be able to work with students on phonics.
Excellent. Thank you.
Where's the grant come from again?
TSI is specifically for grades K through 3, and it's a state grant, and it can only be used for struggling readers.
Thank you.
It's a piece of the it's a piece of the blueprint legislation initially.
Got it.
Is this something that we're going to have to renew frequently, or is this pretty much just a one-time?
The purchase or
Yeah,
the grant?
purchase.
No, the purchase, we talked about that actually at Curriculum and Instruction, and we see these books getting us several years. I mean, at some point, like any other book, yes, we would have to look at replacement, but we don't see that for several years down the road.
Excellent. Thank you.
Decoding hasn't changed, phonics hasn't changed in what we're doing.
How many words Webster's recognizes, right?
Any further discussion, any further questions? And we move to the vote on Mr. Bickford's motion to approve tonight's consent agenda as presented. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes, and the student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bechtel.
Thank you.
Our second item under consideration this evening, new business, is the comprehensive maintenance plan. We have Mr. Prue, our Chief Operating Officer, and Mr. Stauffer, our Director of Facilities and Maintenance and Operations. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. Tonight we're presenting to you the 2023 Comprehensive Maintenance Plan. Once again, this is an annual document that we bring in front of you as required by the Maryland State Department of Education Public School Construction Program and the Interagency Commission on School Construction. This year's program does have a new format and new content. It does provide information on performance and results of our Maintenance and Operations Department planned systems and process improvements, staffing and budgetary status, and planned actions. And with that, we'll give you a quick sense. As I mentioned, the content changed. There are 5 sections. The appendix contains information that's been included in past reports. And moving forward, this year's report is going to be used as a baseline for comparison, from both a budgetary perspective, a staffing perspective, and performance on work orders and how that takes place. Mr. Stauffer is going to give you a rundown here of each of the sections to give you a sense of what's in the current document.
Okay, good evening. Section number 1 is Introduction and Supporting Information. So in this, we list our guiding principles, our vision, our mission, our interrelationship with the Educational Facilities Master Plan. So how do we work together as a team to come up with a plan for the schools? Strategic and tactical focus, so what are we going to do out in the future, and what are we going to do near term? Computerized maintenance management system, or as we call it, School Dude. It helps us to manage our work orders and our personnel and make sure we are doing a very good job of getting work completed. And facilities assessments. We have outside personnel come in and do some assessments. The state does those. They're actually doing those starting this week. And then we also do some internal assessments to make sure that we're ready for the inspections that come our way. So it's a double-edged sword here. We try to get everything and be very up to date. And section 2, it's a view of the performance of the maintenance department. So there's a lot of metrics that go into this section. Most of it is new. Some of the metrics we presented last year, the year before, but the IEC has asked for specific information. So in that vein, here are some of the examples, the number of work orders completed. So on our preventive maintenance, we completed 3,886 work orders. On our straight maintenance, our reactive maintenance, we completed 5,610 work orders. So it just gives them an idea of how many work orders we put into the system, how many we get done. Another thing they're looking for is the number of days to complete a work order. So for our corrective maintenance, we're running at 15.49 days. So this is a high-level average. So we try to get everything facilities-wise, like HVAC, anything that can hinder our teaching of the students, done within 1 to 2 days. But other things that aren't as critical, like maybe replacing some ceiling tile, it may take longer because we do have those critical items we have to address first. So on average, all those items rolled up into 15 and a half days, which is pretty good. So the percentage of work orders by type, so the work orders right now, we're running 37% are preventive maintenance and 63% are corrective maintenance. We want to move more to preventive maintenance. Resources and inputs, section 3. Compare staffing levels and budget to industry staffing. So the industry standard for staffing is published by the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, APPA. So many of the school districts across the country use this as a standard. It's not just our level of schools, but also universities, hospitals use this, a lot of different people use it. So IAC has selected levels for each of these categories. So for maintenance, it's APPA level 2, which comprehends the stewardship, which if you look around the room here, I consider this comprehensive stewardship. Everything's clean, everything's in its place. It's just a good environment. On the custodial side, ordinary tidiness. So everything has its place, everything's been cleaned, everything is well maintained. So that is 1 full-time employee per 16,700 gross square feet. So that's a pretty good night's work. And upkeep of grounds. They keep grounds separate from the custodial crews, and they are suggesting 1 person per 10 acres. At that rate, we'd need 56 people. I would not ever suggest 56 people. but that's what they are suggesting. So it is something for us to discuss with them and see what direction they really want us to go. And in the budgetary side, industry standards based on the replacement value of all WCPS facilities. So our current replacement value is $1.46 billion. And it's also based on the number of square feet, judged at $400 a square foot. So maintenance is expecting a budget of 3% of the replacement value. So that comes up to a pretty big number. I think it's $53 million. Operations expected a budget of 1% of replacement value, and I think that's right around $17 million. So it gives us some type of guideline of the budget that we should be shooting for to maintain our facilities in the appropriate manner. In section 4, we have planned actions. So we want to discuss the action plans for fiscal year 22. We're beginning to move to a plan of predictive maintenance method. So we want to move past just the plan, we want to move to predictive. We want to use statistics to understand what may fail within the next week, month, year, and be prepared for that. Implement inventory control with bar or QR codes. We've already had those pasted on a lot of our equipment, but we need to complete everything. So we can track the usage, how much maintenance is done on that piece of equipment, what it costs us, so we know when we need to start thinking about replacing it. And continue increasing professional development for staff skill attainment. That is one thing that I like to stress. My past life, that's what I did, train people on how to become better at business operations. So it's a good thing for everybody. Our crews are very glad that they're getting training, so they're doing really well during the training. It's not just show up and sign your name and move on. And section 5 is obstacles and missing resources. It's being a lean operation with a limited budget constrains us on what we can do. So that's the main thing there. But as the inventory ages, sustaining the properties at an adequate level will be a struggle. And we've seen that here recently. So we're getting a lot more corrective maintenance work orders in than we'd like to see. And in the appendix, as Mr. Prue mentioned, we have the school profiles, which you're used to seeing, picture of the school and some of the basics. The FMP Chapter 3, Inventory and Evaluation, which is a chapter that we share with our compatriots on the other side of the office. Job descriptions, that's the job descriptions for our maintenance and custodial people. And the vandalism results, for instance, this year we had 6 instances for $4,632, much reduced over last year. So that was a good result.
So I think with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have on the report and the data, and then we'll be seeking your approval of this report to send it down to MSDE.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there a motion first?
I have a question. The motion
Do that
first?
after the
Okay.
motion.
Sorry, Mr. Prue, you threw me off base.
Mrs. Williams, I moved for the approval of the comprehensive maintenance plan for fiscal year 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zenmeyer. Mrs. Murray?
When I was reading through it, I noticed that Salem Avenue, which was totally rebuilt in, I want to say 1996? 2006, there you go. But it didn't reflect that on that page. And also, you have Funkstown listed as a pre-K. So those are the only two discrepancies I found, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
We can check that data and make sure the appropriate edits before it goes down to the state.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Gessert?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the facility maintenance and operation team members, because our schools across the board, I mean, we have some very old schools, but our team works very hard in maintaining them, and it shows. It really does. I mean, you go to any school, very clean, dated, but they're very functional. And it's because your teams have done a fantastic job for a long time. They've all been, doing that. I mean, we have other staff in the schools, custodians, they all take care of the school. So I know that you guys are going to be doing a lot of more work with these state regulations that are coming. We talked to that in our facilities meeting at extensive levels. And I think, we're in good hands with Mr. Stauffer running that. This is just, it's amazing to see all the work that goes into this and the numbers that the state is saying that we should have. 53 people, and how many do we have? 0. For grounds. I mean, it's amazing what our teams do on a daily basis. And they're telling us that we have to have 53 people to do it, and we have 0. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But that's because they genuinely care about our school system. We have very dedicated people working for us. And I mean, that is just amazing. And, I don't know how we're going to, come up with 53 people to do the grounds work. I don't know if we're ever going to do that. I mean, that takes a lot of money to do that. But I know that we can do it with less because we do it now, and our schools look great. We always have little problems here and there, but our team is willing to work and get it done and do it very professionally. I just can't say enough for our teams that, especially this team, the facilities maintenance and operation team, what they do on a daily basis to make us look good. So please tell everyone how much we appreciate. I mean, I speak for all board members. It is fantastic what you guys are doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gesser. We'll pass on your well wishes.
Thank you.
And I'd like to kind of piggyback off what Mike was just saying there as well. And obviously, everything does look great. And with how old everything is in the county, it's not an easy task. And it gets done, and it gets done very efficiently. And after living in Baltimore for 10 years with old buildings as well, we don't have to shut our schools down, because air conditioning isn't working or whatever it may be the way they do. So kudos to you and the staff for making all that happen, all the way, down the line there. But one question, just not necessarily a question, but an ask. Could you just very briefly, doesn't have to be very long, that inventory and evaluation, could you kind of just let the public know about that weighting system, just so they understand how you guys came up with the plan here?
So you're,
It's on page 67, and the,
are you referencing the Educational Master Plan, the appendix?
yeah.
The appendix is part of the Educational Master Plan, I believe.
Am I
So
in the
the
wrong
document that was presented in June is the Educational Master Plan, and staff goes through and they rate all of those various categories, 30, 40 categories. I don't know if anybody knows off the top of their head. I see Rob Rollins in the back of the room. He's kind of in charge of the Educational Master Plan along with Mr. Stauffer. But they have a rating system. I want to say it's 1 to 5. And they rate all those categories. And then we sum that up to try to get an idea of, what schools collectively on all those evaluative areas might be in the greatest need. And a lot of times you'll see something like an air conditioning project coming up, or heating project coming up, or window replacement project coming up. Score is very low, and all of a sudden we do that replacement, and then that's enough to bump that school back up. And that's how a lot of the assessments are made and the determinations of where we are. Our plan right now with maintenance, so the comprehensive maintenance program is part of the capital improvement program, part of the educational master plan program. We call those 3 sister documents. That's what helps guide both Rob and Mr. Rollins and Mr. Stauffer and Mr. Prue in our maintenance planning. Right now, we are very focused on keeping our students dry, so our roof projects, our boiler, air conditioning projects, some envelope issues, electrical systems, so we don't have the kind of failures that some systems do. Our goal would be to replace one school year with about 50 buildings. That would make a renewal of a building, or a renovation of a building, replacement of a building that will be 50 years. We're obviously not on that cycle. The last buildings we opened, I guess, were Barbara Ingram
And
Academic
Sharpsburg,
Center and Sharpsburg.
which was last
And
August.
we don't have any plans right now for any other new buildings for the foreseeable future, probably for a couple of years. So we're out of that one building a year cycle. So to your point, Mr. Guest, our team does a great job keeping things going, and we're continuing to focus on those big systemic projects that keep our buildings moving forward the best we can.
And to piggyback, I think, on that as well, an item you might hear later tonight to kind of give some foreshadowing to the audit report. The audit committee met a week or so ago, and you've got the audit report coming to you tonight from our outside auditing firm and Mr. Brandenburg and the audit committee. But one of the items of concern noted by the audit committee is that our depreciation is exceeding our capital investment, and that's not the right formula. So that means our buildings are aging faster than they're being replaced. And so that is something that is a challenge, but it's not entirely, of course, within this board's control.
Dr. Zednak?
I have to echo what my cohorts on your committee have said. I'm amazed every time we meet and see what you're doing. And the chapter that has the school profiles is worth the price of admission. I've already used it like several times. Thank you. And thank you for your patience with me. You do an amazing, amazing, amazing job.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that in another lifetime, I was working in the area of school reform, and that took me into some other counties in the state, so some elementary and middle schools. And I was always amazed and always glad to come home to Washington County to see the learning environments that our county has invested in for our students. And I think it speaks highly of the pride that our workers have in their work and in their school system and in their community. It takes one thing to develop a plan, but it's an altogether different thing to make that plan work. So I commend those of you who are developing the plan and working the plan to our benefit. There was a picture in our most recent update, I believe, our Friday update, of a school, and I find it remarkable. I think we must have the shiniest floors in any school system in the state of Maryland. I don't know what our work crews use to make those floors look as they do, but I just think it's, they shine as do our employees shine. So we're very grateful for the work you do and for the work they do. So thank you very much.
Thank you for noticing.
I actually have kind of one more question to go back to the original question to make those corrections that Linda asked about. That wouldn't cause any material changes to the plan to do that, right? We can just go ahead and change those words, right? Perfect.
Right. So we're voting on the adoption of the comprehensive maintenance plan. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes, and the student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
This time, I'll move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Michael.
Okay, thank you, President Williams. Number of recognitions. October is a busy month of things to recognize. And the first thing I'd like to recognize is Learning Disability Awareness Month, the month of October, October 1st, October 31st. We certainly thank our teachers, our school staff, our ESP staff, our IAs, even our families that work with our students that have disabilities. Especially want to thank our students themselves. They work extremely hard to be successful with a variety of supports. So October is Learning Disabilities Awareness Month. I think it's important that we all recognize that we can help each other, and we can change the lives of children forever by doing so and help them overcome obstacles and help them thrive. So again, Learning Disabilities Month, the month of October. Second recognition for the month of October is recognition of National Principals Month. We are incredibly grateful for all the work of our principals. I mean, obviously our ESP staff, our teacher staffs, but I know that the principals have had to do a tremendous amount of work with COVID, all the ways from the very first days when staff went home. Principals never went home. Principals never left the building, all the way back in March of 2020. They were one of the staff members that stayed, even when custodians left. We sent them home in those early weeks. Principals remain in the building to keep the building open, deliver, get the mail, take care of things, organize our distance learning, and they've continued to do that, those types of efforts through virtual learning and through our reopening this year. And I just want to thank all of our principals for their hard work, their energy and effort that they put into things. So just a couple slides tonight to recognize our principals. You just saw our elementary group was up there. Our middle school principals, certainly want to thank them, as well as our high school principals. Again, these people have been on the front lines of all of our schools and have kept us going through COVID, but we just want to acknowledge recognition of National Principals Month here in October. The next recognition for the month of October is National Bullying Prevention Month, and I'd like to invite Helen Huffer to come forward. We recognize the challenges of bullying. It's unfortunate when bullying happens. We live in a society where these are challenges for us. We know that it affects the academic, emotional, and mental state of our children sometimes. And I just want to give Ms. Huffer an opportunity just to share a little bit about how we're addressing bullying.
Thank you. Members of the board, Dr. Michael, thank you for recognizing Bullying Prevention Month throughout October. All school staff encourage positive interactions among our students each day to assist in bullying prevention. We ask that parents continue to support their students as they transition back into in-person learning and adjusting to the social settings at school. Please encourage students to talk to an adult in the school if a problem arises. This takes all of our collective efforts to prevent. This evening, we want to recognize and appreciate the efforts of our students, parents, and staff who work every day to provide a safe and supportive environment for learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, if you ever feel like your child's being bullied or you have any concerns about bullying, please contact your school, your principal, and we immediately want to address that. Also in the month of October, October 11th is School Lunch Week. We have a tremendous amount of effort. I love our lunch team. I wouldn't say ladies because we have a lot of ladies and gentlemen that work in our lunch program, feeding our students both breakfast and lunch. And Mr. Mike Emley's here with us tonight just to bring a little attention to School Lunch Week of October 11th. Mike?
Good evening, President Williams, board members. Dr. Michael, thank you for recognizing National School Lunch Week. We're very fortunate to have 220 dedicated food nutrition professionals that serve our students each day. Thus far this year, we've had 26 days of school and they've already served almost 500,000 meals. Food nutrition service staff continue to face challenges that we've never experienced before. They continue to rise to the occasion, work together as a team to overcome those challenges, and not let anything get in their way of the mission of feeding the children. Every day I hear about and personally see food nutrition service staff going above and beyond to ensure the students not only have a great meal, but a great experience in the cafeteria. Our students love interacting with the students and seeing them enjoy the products they have worked so hard to prepare. That's something that was taken away last year from them, and they're extremely excited to have that back this year. Recently, I was visiting with our manager, Erin Poster, in Boonesboro. We were watching the kids come through the line. I noticed Erin was getting a little bit emotional. And I said to her, "Did I do something wrong?" And she said, "No, I'm just excited to see kids getting back in school and us getting back to what we love, and that's serving the students." I asked her, in her words, what it meant for her to have kids back in the cafeteria. Her response: "Being able to see all the kids again on the first day of school gave me such an overwhelming feeling of complete happiness and joy. I can't express enough how content and full my heart felt to see them coming through our service lines again. I was never so happy in seeing all my nutritious choices and smiling faces on those kids. It brought tears to my eyes to be able to feel a sense of normal again and know we were finally giving the kids the options they deserved." That's just one example of the passion and dedication our staff have for feeding and serving our students and what it means to them. I'd like to publicly thank all food nutrition service heroes for their service and dedication each day to our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emley. I too would like to thank our food service workers. They do an incredible job. I try to always stop and see them when I visit schools. Whether they're preparing meals or cleaning up or serving, they always seem to have a good attitude and are a vital part of our team. I know we've been struggling a little bit to get food. It's hard to believe for our food programs right now, but it's a challenge with the trucking industry and some things like that. And I know Mike's team's been working extremely hard to make sure that we do have, a breakfast and lunch program meals available to our students. And again, I want to thank the staff. This time I'd like to call on Dr. Willow just to give us a summer school update. So the first meeting in October every year, we provide the board with a little bit of an update on summer school, a little different summer school this year. And I'm excited to have Dr. Willow present an update.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the school board, Dr. Michael. I wanted to take some time to just walk through some of the summer programming that we accomplished this past summer, and then share some things as we're beginning to think about how we can improve on this for next summer. So, as always, we try to plan asynchronous summer learning initiatives. That's really when our students are with our parents, other community providers. We share these activities with daycare providers, other partnerships, and the goal is to continue summer learning. So we have some different partnerships that we've created. We, of course, have the summer digital newsletter, which has a whole bunch of different activities that parents can do at home with their students or child care providers. We work with the Washington County Library to provide students with a rail card that allows them to check books out over the summer digitally. Of course, they can also do that in person. We've expanded our collection of digital books. We have teaching books and capstone books. Both of those have computational thinking, CTE, hands-on activities that students enjoy over the summer. The Flipster is our digital magazine that just allows students to access magazines digitally. Parents can access these with students from their home, so this is not something, it's a generic login that others have access to. And we also, as always, have the iParent portal. And at the time, we had the distance learning parent website, but we have since closed that down since we're back in person this year. So this year we started with summer camps, and the goal was to reinforce student literacy and/or math. But we knew we wanted to make this high interest. We wanted to make this fun. And I think I've shared with you this next slide where we had our teachers, our counselors, our principals, all work together to create high-interest camps. But again, the goal, focusing on improving literacy and/or math skills. Some of these camps ran half-day, some of them were full-day. We did provide transportation, and we did have food nutrition services for breakfast and lunch when appropriate, depending on the start time of the camp. Couple of things that we saw, and this is the first time that we did something like this, so we were tracking registrations, and what we quickly noticed was that many students were registering for more than one camp. So what we wanted to do was break that down a little bit further. And so for our summer camps, we had 2,547 unique elementary, that means students that participated in at least one camp. But when we look at all of our camp registrations, that number jumps to 5,939, which means we had students participate in more than one camp. The same for middle school, 966 for summer camps. And when we look at our tutoring, which was the other program that we offered at elementary and middle, again, the idea was to help students with readiness, especially in literacy and math. We had structures set up where at least 30 minutes of instructional time, small groups, we tried to keep no more than 4 students, 5 students at most, offered at our elementary and middle, and again, breakfast and lunch when appropriate, and transportation also, again, depending on the times that the students were coming into the elementary schools. So when we look at that, again, we had 631 students at the elementary school and 111 students at the middle school. I thought it was interesting, so I went back and I looked at last year's data. If we combine these two numbers, we were over 3,000 students when we look at elementary for tutoring and summer camps. The previous year, we had about 364 students at elementary. So we went from 364 to 3,178 in elementary. Previous year, we had 83 at the middle school, and again, when we combine the opportunities that we provided this last summer with the camps and the tutoring, we were over 1,000 students at the middle school. When we look at high school, we ran a different model for high school. We divided into semester 1 and semester 2. And we offered, specifically at high school summer school, original credit, which would be the first time a student took the credit, Repeat, this would be an opportunity for a student who did not pass the previous time they took the course. And at North and South, we offer a transition credit that allows students to come in and become more familiar with the building, build study skills, some organizational skills, things that students would need to be successful going into 9th grade. So when we look at that, we're looking at this again by enrolled credits, because part of our challenge in the past was we would have students enroll, but we necessarily wouldn't get students to complete. Sometimes students would enroll with us in March or April or May, but then when it came time to June, we would have students that would not participate. Much different this year. Our success rate was much higher. As we look at these numbers, when we look at original, repeat, and transition credit, again, the success rate much better this year than in previous years. And again, I have to thank our teachers, counselors, our PPW, our administrators that work together to meet the needs of students to put these programs together. So what does this mean overall for high school summer school? Because I like to look at it in terms of credit. So we had 496 students earn an English language arts credit, 513 math, 277 science, 276 social studies, and we had 98 students graduate as a result of our 2021 summer school program. The previous year, we had 19 students that took advantage and graduated from summer school. This year, we earned 2,101 credits, 2,101. The previous year, 541. So I think our structure tells us that we were able to meet the needs of students. And again, some of these students are getting ahead. Some of the students may have came out of COVID, and we knew that looking at our data from the spring, it was going to be important to offer different opportunities. A couple things I'd point out. We did not lessen the time. We did not lessen the demand. Our schedule still, what we did to be able to allow for additional opportunities, we just extended summer school. We started earlier and we ended later. So there was no changing of what we've done in the past. We still held students to the same expectations that we've held in the past. What did we learn this year? And I didn't create a slide for this, but just some things as we begin to think for next year. Some of the feedback that we got from parents, how do we expand full-day possibilities for the camps? Because half-day camps can sometimes cause issues for daycare, transportation. It will be a challenge with our staff, but I think there are opportunities to provide, to partner with some of our daycare providers that are out there, some of our other community groups. So we look forward to seeing if there are ways that we can help more students participate in the camp by removing that barrier of daycare. Maybe if you came to the camp in the morning and there was an opportunity in the afternoon to do something different. I'm hoping that we can start the registration process even earlier this year. We would like to explore transportation. I got a full kudos to the transportation department in the sense that we've never bused this many students before at summer school. They responded. We had great hubs and different things set up, but as always, for some parents, it's challenging to get their student to a hub. So how do we expand some of those opportunities for next year, and again, to get more students to be able to participate in these opportunities? And then what we'd like to do is probably here sometime in the winter, again, survey parents and our staff to be able to find out a little bit more about what other summer opportunities that we might be able to provide in future years. So again, thanking staff, our students, our parents, our community that really worked together to put this summer school production on, if you will, and we're really proud of the results, but we know we have more work that can be done. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Willow. So actually, I want to thank everybody that put together summer school. A lot of work went into things in the spring. A lot of ideas were shared. The ESSER money that we had allowed us to expand summer school. So we normally spend about $1 million on summer school through the ESSER money. I think we exceeded close to $3 million in summer school expenditures this year. We think through the ESSER funding, we'll be able to continue to do this camp-type concept, as well as our expanded high school summer school if needed, for the next several summers. So we're excited about that. So again, I want to thank all the teachers, all the staff, everybody to help put together those ideas. A couple announcements here, just to kind of wrap up. The HR team's been working extremely hard. Timothy Haynes has been really driving our job fairs on Wednesdays. And now we're going to kind of take that on the road. So Washington County has immediate openings for paraprofessionals, bus drivers, custodians, substitute teachers, food service workers. We pay competitive wages. We have excellent benefits. And we've seen a lot out of our job fairs that we've hosted at the old Board of Education. And now the team has decided to take their show on the road. So on October 13th, they'll be at Boonesboro High School, and you can kind of see the list down through there. Each week, they'll be at another location from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening. So if you have any interest in any of our positions listed there on the left, or really any position with Washington County Public Schools, it'd be a great opportunity in your community to check it out. Again, many of these, we have immediate openings, and we can help you right there on the spot with the job application process and get you started possibly with Washington County Public Schools. It's a great place to work. Again, great benefits and competitive salaries. I did want to announce tonight we've started the nomination process for ESP of the Year has kicked off. So bus drivers, secretaries, cafeteria workers, paraprofessionals, custodians, maintenance workers, any number of our educational personnel, people out there in the community that have contributed in some special way. We're seeking nominations for some of our superstar people. I think they're all great. Some go above and beyond, many go above and beyond. And this would be a great opportunity to recognize them. Anybody can nominate them. A student can nominate them for the award, a parent, a colleague. So we encourage people to check out our website and to nominate ESP staff members for ESP Member of the Year or ESP Employee of the Year. Again, you can find that on our website. This is all in partnership with our Educational Foundation. It can also be found on their website, and we appreciate their support. And the last announcement I have is we're wishing good luck to Caroline Slagle. She's a Spanish teacher at Smithsburg High School. As the board recalls, she was our Teacher of the Year here for Washington County. She's one of 7 finalists for Maryland Teacher of the Year. You can watch that presentation on MPT2 at 8 o'clock on Thursday. There'll be a group of us here in the auditorium, hopefully being ready to celebrate with Caroline. We'll have to wait and see. We don't have any insider information, so I'll be coming back from Annapolis to be here on Thursday and hopefully celebrate, but win or lose, we're going to celebrate with Caroline anyhow. So we wish her the very, very best of luck. And if you'd like to watch that, I think it's a half-an-hour actual program on MPT2. And definitely Caroline will be recognized on there one way or the other. So with that, Mrs. Williams, I think that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Michael.
Thank you.
We'll move to personnel action. Dr. Pugh.
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. As discussed earlier in closed session, there are a number of staff changes for your review, and at this time I ask for your approval of personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Is there a motion?
President Williams. I move to approve the personnel actions dated Tuesday, October 5th, 2021, as presented in closed session.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Any questions for Dr. Pugh before we move to the vote? Okay, we're voting to approve personnel actions as discussed in closed session today. Those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Pugh.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to reports to the board. Our first report is the presentation of audited financial statements and the auditor's report. We have Mr. David Brandenburg, our Executive Director of Finance, Mr. Al Martin, our Audit Committee Chair, Mr. Michael Sampson from Zelenkowski. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Close enough?
That's good. That's pretty good.
Axelrod LLC. Good evening.
Good evening, President Williams and members of the board and Dr. Michael. You have before you tonight the audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2021. Mr. Sampson of the audit firm Zelenkowski Axelrod is here to talk about their reports, and drafts of these statements were reviewed with the full audit committee on September 24th. Mr. Al Martin of that committee is here and will share his perspective Ms. Rochelle Dorsey, our newest Audit Committee member, is also here tonight. The first section of the financial package following the report from the auditors is called Management's Discussion and Analysis, which is for the purpose of introducing the basic financial statements and providing an analytical overview of our financial activities. Of significance this year is the inclusion of the school activity funds and scholarship funds in our governmental activities and general fund for financial reporting purposes. Federal funding this year was 12.6% of total revenue, nearly double the usual 7%. And that, of course, is due to the COVID relief grants. Our total spending on educational programs was up 7% due to the grants, particularly in the areas of technology and the Anytime Learning program that we had last year. What can be confusing about these financial statements is that there are three different kinds of statements that present different views. The first two statements on pages 17 and 18 are referred to as government-wide, and they reflect the overall financial status considering both short-term and long-term information. And then the financial statements that follow that are more detailed with regard to the individual funds, but they don't include the long-term assets and liabilities. And then we have the budget basis schedule of revenues and expenditures under required supplementary information. Our budgetary basis general fund surplus of $8.0 million, which is 2.7% of our budget, is shown on page 68. And that's the operating budget, unrestricted, that we normally talk about mostly when we're developing our budget. Every category had a favorable budget variance due to the effects of the pandemic, which from closings and partial closings during the year to the coverage of some cost by federal grants. I'd like to thank my staff for all their good work during the year and the substantial assistance that was given to the audit team. I'd also like to recognize the conscientious work of the payroll and accounts payable staff who provide excellent service to this organization throughout the year. And at this time, I'll ask Mr. Sampson to review his audit reports and any other highlights that he wants to mention with you. And then Mr. Martin will add his comments, and I'll also be glad to take any questions at any time.
Thank you, David. So I'd like to thank David and his staff for another successful year of getting the audit issued in a timely fashion. You had to deal with the pandemic, also, increased federal funding, which all pushed an increased burden on the financial department. I just want to make the board aware this year we issued the financial statements slowly. In past years, we issued the financial statements and the single audit together. This year, we'll be issuing the single audit probably in a month or two. Really, the reason for that was the compliance supplement was released later this year. That really governs what compliance requirements we have to test. And also, you have to test increased programs because of the increased CARES Act money funding that the school system did receive. As far as some required communications, we had no significant difficulties in performing the audit. We had no disagreements with management over accounting or auditing principles. There were no proposed material journal entries. There were no consultations with other accountants. And we obtained the required representations from the management of the school prior to issuance of the report. So page 1 of the report is our opinion. We issued an unmodified or clean opinion this year on the financial statements. That's the highest form of assurance we can provide. As David said, the school district did have to adopt GASB 84 this year, which is fiduciary activities. The GASB basically it redefines how a fiduciary activity is classified. And they went through the implementation, and most of the school activity funds and scholarship funds, actually all of them, were now reported in the general fund this year. So that's one change you will see that is different. If you go to page 17, that's the first statement I just wanted to briefly review. I'm just going to go over a few financial highlights. So basically there's two columns. I really want to just point out the net position for both the governmental activities and the business type activities. So you see you did have a negative unrestricted $210 million, a negative $210 million unrestricted net position. That's really due to your unfunded OPEB and pension liabilities. These aren't current liabilities. You'll be funding them in the future. And also the restricted net position of 3.9 million. That's new this year. That's with the GASB 84. That really comprises the net position of the school's activity funds and also the scholarship funds. You also see there for the business type activity, which is the food service fund, had a negative 5.4 unrestricted net position, which is also due to the pension and OPEB liabilities. On page 18, which is your statement of activities, so this is the change in the year. Did your net position increase or decrease? You'll see at the bottom of the page, your change in net position for your governmental activities is approximately 16 million. That was mostly due to basically an increase in net position for the self-insurance fund, which is your medical insurance. Had a positive year that added to it. Your excess of revenues or expenditures in the general fund, and also get a decrease in your OPEB expense of $3.5 million. You'll see the business type activities decreased 107,000. That was, the reason for that was it really had less, they had less expenditures this year due to COVID, and it really was a transfer in of grant funds to help balance out that net position. It was of 1.4 million was transferred from the general fund. So the next statement is on page 19. And of course, interrupt me if you have any questions. So this is the balance sheet. This is the short-term focus. And you'll see it has the general fund and capital projects fund. You'll see the general fund had an unassigned fund balance of $13.5 million as of June 30th, 2021. And you'll see the capital projects fund had a negative 116,000 of unassigned fund balance. And that was basically due to retainage payable recorded, but reimbursement hasn't been received by the school yet. On page 21 is the income statement. And you'll see for the year ended June 30th, 2021, the net change in fund balance was 11 million to the positive for the general fund and 1.1 million for the capital projects fund. The other statement I wanted to go over was on page 24. And you'll see this is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. The food service fund, we already kind of talked about in the previous schedules, but the internal service fund, which is your health insurance fund, had an increase in net position of 6.2 million. And it had an ending net position of 20.3 million as of June 30th, 2021. So it was a positive year for the health insurance fund. And on page 27, the one item I did want to point out there is the statement of changes in fiduciary net position. So this really contains your retiree health plan trust, which you accumulate assets to pay your future post-employment benefit expenditures. They had a positive change in net position of 25.8 million. And you see at the end of the year, they had 106.9 million of assets accumulated in the trust. So the last item I really wanted to point out to the board was on page 69, and this is important because it basically presents trend data, and this is related to the retiree health plan trust. This basically is your OPEB liability. You can see how the plan is funded over time. And you'll see probably middle way through the page, you'll see plan fiduciary net position as a percentage of your total OPEB liability. And for 2021, you'll see it was 35.3% funded. And you'll see over time, 2017, it was 18.89. So it has been increasing and headed in a positive direction. That's all I had, unless there was any questions from the board. I can turn it over to Al to.
I just wanted to cover a couple highlights, and
just say that your audit committee appreciated the opportunity to work with the auditors and the finance staff, and we were very glad to hear the audit went very smoothly. The information that you see here in the required presentations presented in the format required by governmental accounting standards for audit presentation in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. But I find probably the most useful thing from a lay standpoint is the management discussion and analysis. And so I would refer you to take a look at the first couple pages of this document, right past the audit opinion, starting on page 4. It talks a little bit about some of the financial highlights in lay person's terms, which will give you good talking points to share with your constituents and other stakeholders of the school system. One of the other things that I like is on page 9, you can see not just where things were with the statement of financial position, your assets, liabilities, and net balance or net position, but you can compare it this year, June 30th, 2021, with the year before. And that trending, I think, is important for you to see that as governing board members, so that you get some sense of where you are and where you came from and what progress or lack thereof you're making towards any goals you might have with the system. The good news here, as David was saying, and our auditors, is that your assets increased from $366 million in the governmental activity fund to $404 or $405 million. Your liabilities went up some, but the other thing that was important here is that your net position basically increased significantly here from 18.1 million up to 34.2. A lot of that was the result of the governmental grants that were mentioned earlier, and the fact that you had cost containment by not having to operate the schools during the pandemic. So that was a plus for you there. The business activities were a drag, and as was mentioned, there was a transfer from the general fund from grant money to help support the lack of revenue in the food service fund. But overall, you can see the net position of the school system in total increased from 14.1 million to 30.1 million. So I think that's something that you can be very pleased about as a system. The next page 10 shows the various revenues and expenses there and the relative changes there. The other thing I wanted to point out was if you look at some of the concerns that are mentioned in the report by management, page 14 gets into a little detail on the capital assets and your debt. And as you all know, you all account for the land and buildings and equipment that are part of the school system and providing education to our students here in the county. However, because you're not a taxing entity, the county provides property taxes and income taxes that you get a portion of and state revenues to fund the operation. You don't issue the debt on the capital assets. That's done by the county. So the assets are shown here, and one thing that I heard was mentioned earlier in the meeting and that I wanted to point out is if you look back on page 33 of the report, this is one of your significant accounting notes on capital assets. Your buildings and improvements are depreciated. Anything over $5,000 is capitalized if it's a capital asset. Below that, it's expensed in the current year. Buildings and improvements are depreciated at historic costs spread out over anywhere from 25 to 40 years, depending on the nature of the asset. An actual building would probably be at the high end of that at 40 years. Mechanical systems would be at a lower end, a roof or something like that, because the reality is it's not going to last 40 years. So the staff puts basic limits on those. Furniture and equipment's depreciated over 4 to 15 years, and the other equipment under capital lease is 4 to 5 years, your copiers and things like that. If you look back on page 46, this gives a detailed listing of the capital asset activity for the year. And the one thing that's concerning here, it's good news that the system did invest $5.6 million in new land and facilities under construction, and other capital assets being depreciated added another $39.8 million for a total of $41 million altogether there. But the problem is that you're not really keeping up with the depreciation on these assets, because ultimately, if you look at what is the historic cost of these assets spread over their useful lives, it's basically what you're spending in new replacement money is not keeping up with even the wear and tear at historic costs, let alone replacement costs. So that's something that ultimately the system's going to need to discuss with your other stakeholders and funders. And, you know, until you can get to a point of at least spending each year on replacements and upgrades an amount equal to the depreciation, the system's going to lose ground in the long term. So that's something I think you all need to be concerned about as board members. And hopefully with your staff and other stakeholders work through that a little bit there. The other thing I wanted to mention was, as the auditors mentioned, commend you for making progress on the unfunded liabilities on retiree health insurance. It was great that you're investing in that Maryland Association of Boards of Education combined pool for long-term investments for your OPEB liabilities, trying to fund that. You had, I think, David, a 24% return on that this past year, which is very good. That's probably not sustainable forever, but at least, as the auditor mentioned, it did help you, increase your funding level on your OPEB liabilities. And hopefully, the state had a good year with its pension liabilities, and that helped reduce or at least avoid, an increasing deficit in the amount of unfunded liability for the pension program. So all in all, it was a good year for the school system. I'd like to commend the staff, thank our volunteer audit committee members we have with us tonight, Rachel Dorsey. Also on the committee is Ray Gray and Kathy Vaughn and myself. And it was a good process with the pre-audit meetings and consultations through the audit, and then our post-meeting where I guess the end of September it was now. We got together with the auditors and the staff to review a draft of this report. And we basically, the one question I always ask the staff is, are you comfortable? Because these are management statements. The one thing in here the auditor does is their work is to express that two-page opinion that these present fairly the financial position and results of operation. And they are relying on their own work, and also a representation letter from the staff that basically says that they've told them everything, they haven't hidden things, and none of us are aware of any issues that came up during the audit that would lead us not to believe that. So all in all, clean opinion, congratulations, and the committee did vote unanimously to recommend acceptance of the report.
Ms. Williams, I'd like to thank the audit committee and their service and being willing to be part of this, as well as our auditor, but more importantly, David and his team. I know they work extremely hard to make sure everything adds up, and they're very thorough, and they follow all the rules, and are very, very committed to presenting Washington County the best possible light and have everything above board and just do an excellent job. So I want to thank our team, thank the audit committee for their volunteering and their service, as well as our auditors. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions or comments? David, thank you for the fine work your department does and for the fine work you do. Ms. Dorsey, I'm sorry I didn't have your name listed to introduce you, but thank you for your service on the committee. Mr. Martin, how many years have you been chairing our audit committee now?
Well, Jeff Yingling used to be the chair, but I've taken over, and I guess this is my second year as chair.
Second year as chair and many years as a member of the committee.
Yes, I was still working for the city when I first joined the committee, so as finance director.
Well, thank you for those years of service.
Glad to do it, and it's challenging at times to understand these statements, and that's one thing at least, we had to file similar statements with the city and other government entities, so I'm familiar with the process.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sampson, for being with us this evening with the presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you. It's great to know we have a clean audit.
See, that look good news.
For that, yeah, good news. Okay. Continuing with reports to the board, we'll have board member committee reports. Dr. Zentmeyer, would you like to begin down there?
C&I will meet here November the 15th at 1:30.
Thank Desford, Facilities Committee?
Yes, the only thing I'll say is we met and we talked about this evening. It's the maintenance plan, so we've already went over that. Our next meeting will be probably in November, Mrs. Williams, at this point.
Thank you, thank you. Finance Committee, Mr. Evans.
Yeah, nothing new. We will have our next meeting on Friday, October 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Human Resources, Mrs. Murray.
I have nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. Policy Review and Development, Mr. Bigford.
Policy and Review met and presented the, actually, our next meeting is Tuesday, October 26th at 11:30 here, and we will be discussing, as I mentioned earlier, the early dismissal policy as well as dress code.
Great, that's it for our board committees. Mr. Gupta, do you have anything that you'd like to report from student government?
County student government met and we discussed meeting dates and how to host general meetings again.
Thank you, colleagues, for those reports. We'll move to miscellaneous business. Under miscellaneous business, we always have our future agenda items. Coming up very soon, next week, in fact, we have a work session on our legislative program, and we will be discussing that in October, that's October 19th. Teacher recruitment, hiring, and teacher induction academy in November. A joint meeting with the Board of Education and our Washington County delegation is scheduled for November 9th. We will be discussing the board's legislative program at that meeting. Also in November, we have student enrollment, free and reduced meals eligibility rates. And then in December, we will have the board's reorganization meeting. And also a report on the middle and high schools program of studies for the 2022-2023 school year. And we have a work session then in December for the superintendent's draft budget for fiscal year 2023. It's hard to believe that it's budget time again.
Here we go again.
It comes so quickly around, doesn't it? So those are our future agenda items. If you have suggestions for items that you would like to see on an agenda of a business meeting or a work session, please let a member of the committee know so that we can get those things scheduled. Board member comments. Mr. Gupta, would you like to begin down there?
Sure. So I know now we're approaching homecoming season. I believe Barbara Ingram has also had their homecoming. So I just want to wish all the students having a good time, a safe time. And I know that other counties have moved their homecoming. I'm happy that Washington County has continued its plans to have all of them. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mrs. Murray?
Yes, last week South played North in a unified tennis match. And there was a student from North that was actually being a line judge. Her name was Ella Murphy. She was so great. She was very encouraging. She was very helpful. I just loved the way she coached the kids and talked to them and was just so encouraging to them and really made the game fun, but also a learning experience. And you don't get that very often, especially from another student. So I want to say thank you to her. And also I want to say thank you to teacher Marjorie Chapman at the Future Stars Salon at the Tech High. She's doing an amazing job with her students. They finally opened up again. I was so pleased to be there Friday and see everybody running around working on clients. So thank you to them, thank you to Ms. Chapman, and thank you to Ella.
Thank you. Mr. Bickford?
Just wanted to say 3 of us leave this evening to head to Annapolis for a conference with the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, which the highlight for me will be hearing from our new state superintendent, and I believe we get to ask him questions, hopefully, which I hope to press him on maybe making some decisions that affect the school year during the summertime and not once the school year has started. But we'll see how we do. But I do want to thank President Williams because she is the co-chair of this conference with all the many things that are going on. I appreciate you taking the time to plan this, and I'm sure it will be very educational. Pun intended.
Thank you. Mr. Guestwood.
I just have a question for Dr. Michaels, a clarification. You had stated in one of the presentations about the hiring at like a job fair. So just for clarifications, if I'm in Boonesboro and I live in that, I can go to that job fair to help one of my schools there, like Boonesboro. So like I'm a resident of Boonesboro and there's an opening, I can go there for the job fair and apply for positions for that?
The job fair, so we've been doing the last 5 or 6, or the HR team's been doing the last 5 or 6 Wednesdays. They've been doing in the morning, I believe. They've been doing job fairs, and just as a way to kind of expand our net to try to encourage more people to apply, they're doing like what they're calling a road show. So they're going to the various communities and making the job fair available from 5 to 7 each night of those, the next, I'm not sure what nights those are, maybe Wednesdays, but there's 5 of them, I think, straight in a row. But you can go to the Boonesboro Job Fair and apply for any of our jobs across the system. So it's not limited to just the Boonesboro jobs. It could be any of the jobs in the system that are open at this time, or get your name in and get the name on file for even future positions.
So we're encouraging people to, if they live in the town that want us help to do something and they have an opening, they can go there and possibly work in that school system down there.
It's certainly possible that we have openings right in the various schools that are open, or you can even find out, are there any openings here in the south end of Washington County, if that would be your interest. But the job fairs are all open to anybody, and they're available for any of our positions that are open across the county. They're not limited just to the Boonesboro campus, for instance, on the first one. So
I also hear that we have a shortage of bus drivers, and we definitely need bus drivers. So how are we encouraging those? I mean, we're not going on a road show with buses, I don't assume, but.
Not with buses, but we're helping people fill out an application, go through that, get that process started. If you are, an interested candidate, we do have paid training, so we pay for training. That's a new initiative we have. We have increased bus driver pay. We've benefited all of our bus drivers. If people choose to take benefits, we have full benefits available for every bus driver now. That was another new initiative we have, plus a signing bonus. So there's quite a bit of opportunity here in Washington County. We encourage people to check out the job fair, as well as the website, and apply through the website. They don't have to go to a job fair to apply for a position.
Great, thank you.
Again, I want to thank our HR team for doing this. This is 5 of their nights to go out and do everything they can to try to encourage people and to fill our positions.
Thank you. We all need employees, so do what we can, so thank you.
Mr. Evans. Thank you, Mr. Guestwood.
So, like many positions that are in critical shortages, another area of need is school nurses. And my sister just recently finished an accelerated nursing program, and she became a nurse and up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and she's able to go and fulfill her life dream of being able to help people like that. And unfortunately, like everywhere, there is a critical shortage in the nursing profession as well, and people, are getting paid very, very pretty sums of money, to say the least, to be able to do those jobs. And after watching my father in a nursing home for almost 6 years, that is a very thankless job. It is not an easy job to do, and I certainly understand why people are struggling to want to go into that profession. A lot of professions are under fire these days, and the nursing profession is certainly one of them. I briefly spoke about it last meeting, and I don't know if it's still the case, but I know that we have many positions in our school system that are currently doing what I personally believe to be the county health department's job. I know we're struggling to retain a lot of our school nurses as it is. Again, I don't know if they're still doing the quarantine phone calls or whatever it may be, but that is not an easy conversation for someone who was not necessarily trained to do that. I implore the school system, again, to put the county health department work back to them and let our school nurses and our school staff do the jobs that they were hired to do. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Dr. Zentmeyer.
It's fall cleaning time, and I have, from my best friends and cousins, gotten some real good treasures from the garages. The older I get, the more of a history buff I become, and we often think of the past as the good old days. 70 years ago, both of these artifacts came from 70 years old. My cousin found a picture of my dad, a 17-year-old kid headed off to Korea. My other cousin found an agenda for the Board of Education from 70 years ago. This was the agenda in the civil defense package 70 years ago, and this is ours today. A little bit more reading. John D. Zentmeyer served on this board 70 years ago, and this is from his garage. He was Hagerstown High School's principal for over almost 26 years before he became a member here. It's really interesting to look at this in the light of COVID. This is the civil defense package that was introduced by President Truman. Similar to Dr. Michael's response to COVID, William Brish responded that he called for us all to become informed and work together on a plan of action to meet wisely and effectively the emergencies as they arise. He said, ours is a great responsibility. Amen to that. In this document also, the U.S. Department of Education told us to be aware, get the facts, correct misinformation, provide practical protective measures for school children, keep them from being emotionally disturbed, volunteer and accept positions of leadership, try to figure out ways in which pupils might be given responsibility. He also adds, though the world situation today is extremely complicated, life does not stop while we build the nation's military strength. Living goes on. Children are born, grow up, go to school, go to college. You cannot put a generation into an educational cold storage and then after put them in an educational hothouse. So that is where we are. George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Let us not forget, but draw upon the lessons we learned 70 years ago. The good old days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. And what does it say about me to remember Dr. Brish as the superintendent of Washington County Public Schools 70 years ago? I wonder, do you happen to know how many years he served as superintendent?
Dr. Brish?
Yeah, because if that was, it must have been an incredible tenure.
A long time.
A long time.
I remember at 4 years old, he was already superintendent. I mean, he was still superintendent.
Signed my report card.
Yeah, he was the first superintendent I was ever aware of.
Dan would probably remember.
He might. Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Just to echo Mr. Bickford's comments regarding the conference that we're going to be leaving to attend here shortly. It's a wonderful opportunity for board members to learn and grow. I'm looking forward to 3 days of interaction with our counterparts from across the state. One of the things that we have happening is a student board member panel, and our very own Kevin Bakum will be facilitating that panel. So for those of you that don't know, Kevin was our previous student board member, so I'm excited. So thank you for a great day of meetings, colleagues. Travel home safely. All those who are here this evening, thank you for being here. For those of you who offered public comment, thank you for that. It's so nice to look out and see seats filled and to know that there are people who are interested in the work that we're doing. So with that, Dr. Michael, unless you have something else additional, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.